Morning everybody, welcome to this week's Tiller's Turf Talk. Hope you're all keeping really well. Well, today we're going to be spreading a bit of fertiliser and we're going to go out shortly and see what Paul's up to. Now today we're not going to talk too much about the spreader we're using, we will talk about it a little bit, but we're going to look at the different fertilisers we use and why we use them in certain applications. Today we fertilise our specialist turfs, our golf turfs, that's greens, fescue, revetting and other bits and pieces, and we use something slightly different. We'll look at the comparison between that and a standard sort of agricultural fertiliser in the field. So yeah, enjoy the video. Let's get out to the field and let's go and watch some fertiliser spreading. Before Paul gets started with spreading this fertiliser, we'll just talk about the spreader itself. Lots of different spreaders we can use. We can use spinning disc, we can use drop spreaders. Our spreader of choice today is the Horstein Cascade, and this is a pneumatic spreader. So the granules are injected through the booms via air and out each individual nozzle there to spread in almost like a spray pattern, but obviously without the water. So this allows us to put fertiliser on in windier conditions when there's not so much spray drift coming out of a disc. This is quite a lightweight granule that we're using, so therefore it's really important that we don't get too much blow. Otherwise we get things like zebra striping, as I would call it, where you get excess fertiliser overriding minimal areas. So it avoids all that, negates all that. So Paul's going to fill up now. Let's get out in the field and let's spread some fert. It's a lovely morning for getting this product on. It's nice and calm, there's some nice damp on the ground, so these granules are going to break down very quickly and help to really stimulate this grass into some real vigorous growth, which we really need now. We're moving slowly now into the golf season, and these products are now being primed up, ready for when all that really kicks off. So the fertiliser used today is a 1209 analysis. Now we know the importance of analysis in crop production or turf production, and we know our NPKs and all the numbers that are associated with it. So we're using a 1209 because we want to just keep trickling a nice bit of nitrogen on, not too much to really flush it, but enough to keep the plant healthy and keep it nicely fed. A little bit of potash there is always good for a bit of root development, and particularly important as we move into autumn to help toughen up the leaf, toughen up the cell walls, everything else, and hopefully just create that little bit of extra disease resistance too, which we desire. Notice there's zero phosphate in there. We know that phosphate levels in these fields are very high. There is no need to add more to something that's already there. So this particular product is a mini granular or a micro granular, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to talk a bit more in the video about the difference between that and talk a bit about compound and blended fertilisers, and also the advantages and disadvantages of certain types on our particularly close mown golf turf. So we'll head back in the field and we'll watch a bit more spreading. When it comes to fertiliser choice, there really are so many options. You've got slow release, controlled release, fast release, instant release, every kind of release you can possibly imagine. You've got every kind of coating, lots and lots of different variations on prill sizes, granular sizes, so many options. But we find this mini gran does a great job for us, for reasons I'll explain a little bit later in the video. But just to explain a couple of fertilisers we use here quite commonly at Tillers. So something like this one here will be ammonium nitrate, so that's a 34.5. That is just what we call a straight in fertiliser language. This is a single dose of nitrogen in that ammonium nitrate form. And then what we're spreading today is this one, and this one is what we call a compound fertiliser. So each of the granules there has been formulated to contain the components of both the nitrogen and the potash, and a little bit of iron and magnesium in there as well, which again will all help the fertiliser work and help protect the plant a little bit more. Particularly that little bit of iron content just helps to harden things off, give that little bit of extra colour, which is fantastic. Now you can actually buy fertilisers that are blended. Now what that means, you'd have things like your straight nitrogen there, would be blended in with some straight potash mixed up and spread in that way. But with the compound we're using today, like I say, we've got good even distribution there on all the granules of all the different components of the fertiliser that we're applying. So brilliant stuff. Now what we'll do, we'll watch a bit more spreading, then we'll head off, and I'm going to just show you just the advantages and disadvantages of both these fertilisers on one of our sort of close mown greens fields, and hopefully explain a bit more then about why we choose the fertiliser that we do. Spreading's going really well, and you honestly do not get a better morning than this. Like I say, a little bit of dampness now. I've had a look at some of the granules that were put down maybe an hour ago. Already they're breaking down nicely into the sward, and a little bit of irrigation, a little bit of rain, and that'll be down there doing the job, feeding those roots, feeding that soil, doing everything we want it to do. So a lot of people say to me, why are you putting so much nitrogen on so late in the year? Traditionally, certainly in greenkeeping time, you start to tone the nitrogen down now a little bit, going into the autumn months, because we're not trying to create a flush of growth. In turf production, we're trying to do something completely different. We're trying to push the growth on, keep these crops established, keep them moving on, keep them strengthened up, ready for lifting. But also, we're in an area what's termed as an NVZ, so we're a nitrate vulnerable zone. So therefore, we have to stop applying nitrogen onto our fields from, I think it's about the 15th of September. So it's important now we give it that one final shot, going into the season and getting into the best condition, best colour, best health it can possibly be. And this fertiliser is doing all that for us. The best way to show the importance of the correct fertiliser selection, particularly on things like golf greens, is to just bring you down to our power bent here. So it's a nice tight knit sward, mown sort of 4.5–5 millimetres, and we're going to turn the camera around now. I'm going to explain why the two fertilisers are so different and why one is going to be beneficial and the other one isn't in this situation. So I'm just going to turn the camera around. So if we look here, we've got ammonium nitrate. So this is what, like I say earlier, like a straight fertiliser, so that's a straight nitrogen. Now if we spread that, I don't know if you can see the dotted around there. So not very close spacings, and what's going to happen there is each of these prills is going to break down with a straight nitrogen. We're going to end up with green dots everywhere. We're going to get bits in between that get no nutrient whatsoever. So they're going to tail off in colour, these here are going to create big green blotches. Now what we can't afford in turf production is to have these peaks and troughs. Now when we move on to our mini granular or micro granular, then the turf is almost getting a dusting. I don't know if you can see it, but we're well covered there. We've probably got, to every 1 granule here, we've probably got 20, something like that, but already that's fallen into the sward, which is why we can't see it very well, and it's going to go down there and it's going to get into work doing its job much quicker. So there is a real difference. And if you imagine if this was a blended fertiliser, and you throw in some potash in that as well, you probably find the spacings even wider, and you really will get a really ununiform feeding pattern. So there we go. So I think we'll end the video there, and just once again, thank you as always for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's given you a bit of an insight into why we choose the fertiliser we choose for certain applications. Now things like the ammonium nitrate is fine in the early days when we're really pushing crops on, but also things like ryegrass crops that sit a little bit more open, where those prills can fall down into the sward, then it will get a much more even, uniform feed on that type of grass. But on these tight mown swards here, like I say, we're just going to get like a dotting effect, which is what we don't want. So yeah, so there we go. So thanks as always for watching. Please continue to share, help us grow the channel. Consider subscribing to Tiller's Turf TV on YouTube if you haven't already. Be much appreciated, and once again help us towards our goal of 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. That would really mean an awful lot to myself and the company. And yeah, we put a lot of effort into these videos, and we really do appreciate all of your support. So in the meantime, have a great weekend, take care everybody, and we'll catch you next week. Cheers for now.